The galaxy had been quiet for 10,000 years. Not the quiet of peace, but the quiet of surrender. The great elder races had stopped reaching for the stars long ago. They had stopped dreaming. They had looked at the universe, mapped every corner of it, and decided there was nothing left to find. The Vethkai lived in crystal cities that floated between dimensions. Their bodies were made of light and thought, and they had existed for so long that they had forgotten what it meant to be young. The Luminari built empires around dying stars, feeding on their last light like old men warming themselves by a dying fire. The architects of the void were the strangest of all. They did not speak. They did not move. They simply watched and calculated, their minds spread across 1,000 worlds. Together, these three races had created the Cosmic Concordat. It was a treaty, but it was also a cage. The Concordat declared that the laws of the universe were finished. The speed of light could not be broken. Time could only move forward. Energy could only decay. These were not suggestions. These were commandments carved into the fabric of reality itself. Any species that tried to change these laws would be destroyed. For 10,000 years, no one had tried. The younger races that still existed had learned their place. They traveled between stars slowly, lived their short lives, and died without asking questions. The elders watched them from their thrones and felt something like satisfaction. The universe was orderly. The universe was controlled. The universe was finished. Then humanity arrived. They came from a small planet orbiting an ordinary yellow star. By galactic standards, they were infants. When the Vethkai first achieved faster-than-light travel, humans were still living in caves and painting on walls. When the Luminari built their first Dyson sphere, humans were fighting wars with swords and horses. By the time humans launched their first rocket into space, the elder races had already been silent for 8,000 years. The humans found the ruins first. Great empty cities floating in the void. Machines that had not moved in millennia. Libraries containing knowledge that would take human scientists centuries to understand. And everywhere, they found the warnings. The warnings were carved in stone, encoded in crystal, written in languages that seemed to speak directly to the mind. They all said the same thing: turn back. Stop reaching. The laws are fixed. The paths are closed. There is nothing beyond but the long quiet. Most species would have listened. Most species would have looked at these warnings from beings older than their entire civilization and felt fear. But humans were not most species. Where others saw warnings, humans saw a challenge. Where others saw closed doors, humans saw locks waiting to be picked. Dr. Yuki Tanaka was the one who found it. She was 43 years old, born on Earth but raised on starships. Her parents had been engineers on the first human vessel to leave the solar system. She had spent her entire life among the stars, and she had never accepted the word impossible. Her ship was called the Prometheus Rising. It was small by elder standards, barely a speck of dust compared to the great vessels that had once carried the Luminari across the cosmos. But it was fast, and it was curious, and it carried a crew of humans who believed that the universe still had secrets to share. They found it at the edge of a dead world. The world had once belonged to the Vethkai. Its crystal spires were dark now, its floating cities crashed and broken. But deep beneath the surface, in a place that should not have existed, Yuki found something that changed everything. It was an anomaly, a place where the laws of physics did not work properly. Light moved at different speeds. Time stuttered and jumped. Cause and effect became tangled together like threads in a knot. For a fraction of a second, in a space smaller than an atom, the universe forgot its own rules. The elders had seen this too, 10,000 years ago. They had studied it, feared it, and sealed it away. They had written warnings in 100 languages. Do not touch. Do not study. Do not ask questions. Some doors are meant to stay closed. Yuki read these warnings. She understood them. And then she did what humans had always done when faced with forbidden knowledge. She reached out and touched it anyway. The sensation was unlike anything she had ever experienced. For one moment, she saw the universe not as a place of fixed laws, but as a draft. A first attempt. A question still waiting for an answer. She saw that the speed of light was not a wall but a suggestion. She saw that time was not a river but an ocean, with currents that could flow in any direction. She saw that entropy, the great decay that the elders had accepted as inevitable, was just one possibility among millions. When she pulled her hand back, she was crying. Not from fear, but from wonder. "Captain," she said to the empty room, her voice barely a whisper, "I think I know why the elders stopped reaching." She paused, looking at her hand. It was shaking. They were afraid. They saw what the universe could become, and they were afraid of what it would ask of them. They chose to stop growing rather than face the risk of changing. She thought of Earth. She thought of humanity's long climb from caves to stars. She thought of every war they had fought, every plague they had survived, every time they had stood at the edge of extinction and refused to fall. "We are not afraid," she said. "We have never been afraid of becoming something new." She turned back to her instruments and began to record her findings. Somewhere in the depths of space, the elders slept in their crystal cities and their dying empires. They did not know that a small human woman on a small human ship had just lit a fire that would burn across the cosmos. They did not know that the long quiet was about to end. Yuki worked through the night, her fingers dancing across controls, her mind racing with possibilities. When her crew woke the next morning, she showed them what she had found. She showed them the anomaly. She showed them the warnings. And she showed them the truth that the elders had tried to hide. The laws of the universe were not finished. They were waiting for someone brave enough to pick up the pen and keep writing. The Prometheus Rising turned toward home. It carried knowledge that would shake the foundations of human civilization. It carried hope that had been forbidden for 10,000 years. And in the darkness between stars, something very old and very powerful began to stir. The elders were waking up. They could feel it in their ancient bones, in their crystalline hearts, in the calculations that had remained unchanged for millennia. Something was changing. Something was growing. Something human. 50 years passed like a heartbeat. In the span of time it took for an elder to complete a single thought, humanity transformed itself. The Prometheus protocols began in secret. 17 research stations hidden in the darkest corners of human space, each one dedicated to a single purpose, understanding why the laws of physics could bend and whether they could be changed. The best scientists from every human world gathered in these hidden places. They worked in silence. They shared their findings through coded messages. And slowly, carefully, they began to pull at the threads that held the universe together. Admiral Kofi Mensa was a soldier, not a scientist. He had spent his life defending humanity from threats, both human and alien. He had seen colonies burn. He had watched good people die for causes they believed in. When the government asked him to protect the Prometheus protocols, he did not hesitate. He understood that some secrets were worth dying for. Dr. Elena Vasquez led the Theoretical Physics Division. She was brilliant and driven, a woman who had sacrificed everything for knowledge. Her marriage had ended because she spent more time with equations than with her husband. Her children had grown up barely knowing her face. But she did not regret her choices. She believed that what they were doing would change the universe itself. And then there was Marcus Chen. Marcus was 26 years old when he joined the protocols. He had been born in space, on a mining ship that traveled between asteroids. He had never known the feeling of solid ground beneath his feet. He had never seen a blue sky or felt rain on his skin. Space was his home, and the void was his birthplace. Perhaps that was why he was the first to succeed. The experiment was simple in theory. Marcus would try to step into the space between the laws. The place Yuki Tanaka had glimpsed 50 years ago. The place where the universe forgot its own rules. He would go there, observe what he found, and return. Elena warned him that it might kill him. Kofi warned him that it might do something worse than kill him. Marcus listened to their warnings, nodded politely, and stepped forward anyway. He vanished. For 3 seconds, Marcus Chen did not exist in any way that human instruments could measure. He was not in normal space. He was not in any dimension the elders had mapped. He was somewhere else entirely, a place that had no name because no one had ever needed to name it. When he returned, he was different. His eyes held light that did not come from any star. When he spoke, his voice seemed to come from multiple directions at once. And when Elena asked him what he had seen, he smiled in a way that made her feel very small and very young. "I saw the source code," he said. "I saw the equations that make reality work. And Elena, they are beautiful. They are waiting for us. They want us to help finish them." The news spread through the protocols like fire through dry grass. More volunteers stepped forward. More experiments were conducted. And slowly, humanity began to learn how to walk between the laws. They called themselves liminal operatives. Humans who could exist in the spaces between moments. Who could think faster than light allowed. Who could be in 2 places at once or no places at all. They were still human, mostly. But they were also something new. Something that had never existed before. The elders noticed. The Vethkai. Seers woke from dreams that had lasted 8,000 years. They screamed in their crystal chambers, their voices shattering walls that had stood since before humanity existed. Something was changing. Something was pulling at the fabric of reality. Something was threatening the CONCORDAT. Ambassador Kethvorian was ancient. He had been alive when the first stars formed. He had watched galaxies collide and species rise and fall like waves on an endless ocean. He had seen threats before, and he had seen them defeated. When he descended upon Earth's delegation at the Galactic Forum, he expected the humans to bow. They did not bow. "You must stop," Kethvorian said. His form shifted as he spoke, light bending around him in ways that hurt human eyes. "You do not understand what you are doing. The last species that tried to rewrite the laws tore a hole in existence itself. We lost 17 star systems. We lost the precursors entirely. They were erased from time. Even their memories were destroyed. You will stop, or we will stop you." President Amara Osei stood before him. She was small by any standard, a woman barely 5 feet tall, with gray hair and tired eyes. But she had been a physicist before she was a politician, and she understood what was at stake. "With respect, Ambassador," she said, and her voice did not shake, "you stopped reaching. You looked at the universe and decided it was finished. We looked at it and saw a first draft." Kethvorian was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was cold. "Then you will face the consequences." The Concordat declared humanity a Class Omega threat, the highest classification, the kind of threat that required total response. The Elder Fleets, ships that had not moved in 10,000 years, began to wake from their long sleep, but humanity was not afraid. The first battle happened at the edge of human space. A Luminary dreadnought called the Eternal Certainty faced a human cruiser called the Defiance. The dreadnought was ancient and powerful, armed with weapons that had destroyed civilizations. The Defiance was small and new, barely a century old. The Eternal Certainty fired. The weapon that struck should have ended the battle instantly. It was a beam of focused entropy, designed to age matter into dust in microseconds. It had destroyed planets. It had ended species. It had never failed. The beam passed through empty space. The defiance was not there. It had not moved in any way the Luminari could understand. It had simply been somewhere else when the weapon arrived. And then it was behind the dreadnought, and human weapons were tearing through shields that had not been tested in millennia. The eternal certainty retreated. It was the first time a Luminari vessel had retreated in 8,000 years. On the bridge of the Defiance, Marcus Chun lowered his hand. His eyes still glowed with that strange inner light. Around him, his crew was silent, still processing what they had just done. "The old rules do not apply to us anymore," Marcus said. "They wrote the laws to control the universe. We are learning to write new ones." The war had truly begun. The Elders had more ships, more power, more experience. They had conquered the galaxy when humanity was still learning to use fire. They expected the war to be short and brutal. They were wrong. Humanity was small and young and fragile. But humanity had something the Elders had lost long ago. Humanity could change. Humanity could grow. Humanity could look at impossible odds and refuse to accept them. The Elders had forgotten what that felt like. They had forgotten the hunger of the species still becoming what it was meant to be. They were about to remember. The war divided everything: stars, empires, families, even humanity itself. Senator David Holt stood before the Human Congress with fire in his eyes. He was a tall man with a voice that could fill stadiums. Billions of people watched him speak, and billions of people felt their hearts stir at his words. "We are losing ourselves," he said. "We are becoming monsters in our quest for power. Look at what these liminal operatives have become. They step outside of time. They exist in multiple places at once. They are not human anymore. They are something else. Something wrong." He paused, letting his words sink in. The Elders were right to be afraid. Some doors should stay closed. Some knowledge should stay forbidden. If we continue down this path, we will not become gods. We will become chaos wearing human faces. And when there are no laws left, when causality itself becomes optional, what will remain of us? What will remain of our children? His followers called themselves the Purist Coalition. They believed that humanity should find another way to survive. They believed that changing the laws of physics was an abomination against nature itself. And they were willing to fight for their beliefs. Civil war threatened human space. Brother turned against brother. Children denounced their parents. Colonies that had lived in peace for generations now armed themselves against their neighbors. Meanwhile, the Elder fleets kept coming. Admiral Mensa stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Unconquered Sun, and watched the tactical displays with tired eyes. He had not slept in 3 days. He had not seen his family in 3 months. All around him, officers worked in tense silence, tracking the movements of enemy vessels that outnumbered them 100 to 1. "Admiral," his communications officer said, "we have reports of purist uprisings on Titan, Europa, and the Centauri colonies. They are demanding we shut down the Prometheus protocols and surrender to the Concordat." Mensa closed his eyes. "And what do the Luminari offer if we surrender?" "Survival, sir. They promise they will not destroy us. They will simply contain us, restrict us to our home system, forbid us from ever leaving again." "A cage," Mensa said softly. "They offer us a cage." "Yes, sir." Mensa opened his eyes. They were hard and bright, like polished steel. "Tell the purists that humanity did not crawl out of caves and cross an ocean of stars to live in a cage. Tell them we would rather die free than live as prisoners. And tell the Luminari that they should have destroyed us when they had the chance." The war continued. Marcus Chen built his army. The liminal cores grew from dozens to hundreds to thousands. Each one was a human who had learned to walk between the laws. Each one was a weapon that the elders had no defense against. Lieutenant Sarah Okonkwo was one of the best. She could move through walls as if they were water. She could see 5 seconds into the future and remembered 10 seconds that had not yet happened. She was 28 years old, and she had killed more Luminari warriors than any soldier in human history. But the changes came with costs. One morning, Sarah woke up and realized she had been dead for 3 hours. Her heart had stopped. Her brain had ceased functioning. By every medical definition, she had been a corpse. But she had refused to acknowledge it. Her body had simply continued moving, continued fighting, because she had not given it permission to stop. What am I becoming? She asked Marcus one night, when the stars outside their ship seemed very far away. Marcus looked at her with eyes that held the light of collapsed suns. His form flickered sometimes now, as if he existed in multiple probability states at once. His voice came from everywhere and nowhere. "You are becoming what humans become," he said, "when they refuse to stop becoming. That is not an answer." "No," he agreed. "It is a promise." Commander Jin Wei had it worse. Something had gone wrong during his transformation. He experienced time backwards now. He remembered his victories before he fought his battles. He grieved for friends who were still alive. He celebrated births that had not yet occurred. Every morning, he woke up knowing exactly how the day would end. Every night, he went to sleep uncertain how the day had begun. "How do you live like this?" Okonkwo asked him once. Jin Wei smiled sadly. "I do not live like this. I survive it. There is a difference." The elders watched humanity tear itself apart and felt something they had not experienced in millennia: hope. Perhaps the humans would destroy themselves. Perhaps the infection of change would burn itself out before it could spread. But the Vethkai saw deeper than their cousins. High Arbiter Vethkael was the oldest living mind in the known universe. He had existed before the first stars ignited. He had watched the birth of galaxies and the death of realities. He had seen species rise and fall like leaves in an endless autumn. And he recognized what was happening. "They are not destroying themselves," he told the Elder Council. "They are evolving. Every generation becomes stronger. Every battle teaches them something new. Every death creates a martyr who inspires 10 more to take their place. Then we must strike harder," the Luminari Archon said. "We must destroy them before they become too powerful to stop." "We cannot," Vethkael replied. "We have been frozen for 10,000 years. We have forgotten how to change, how to adapt, how to grow. They remember. They have never stopped remembering. What do you suggest?" Vethkael was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice held something that the other elders had not heard from a Vethkai in 8,000 years: uncertainty. "We must do what we swore never to do again. We must learn from them. We must remember how to change." The Luminari refused. The architects abstained. But the Vethkai, alone among the elder races, began to do something remarkable. They began to study humanity, not as a threat to be eliminated, not as an infection to be contained, but as teachers, as examples, as proof that the universe was not finished after all. The war raged on. Battles were fought across 1,000 star systems. Ships died in flames that burned between dimensions. Soldiers on both sides gave their lives for causes they believed in. But something had shifted. Something had cracked in the foundation of the Concordat. And through that crack, light was beginning to shine. Elena Vasquez had not left her laboratory in 6 months. Her hair had turned white. Her hands shook when she tried to hold a cup. But her mind was still sharp, still hungry, still reaching for answers. that no one had ever found before. She found it on a Tuesday dawn. The discovery was so simple that she laughed when she finally understood it. For years, they had been looking at the anomalies, the places where physics broke down. They had mapped them, studied them, learned to use them. But they had never asked the obvious question: where did the anomalies come from? Now she knew that deep beneath the quantum foam, beneath the fabric of space and time, beneath everything that made the universe work, there was a place. Not a location in any physical sense. Not a dimension or a realm or a pocket of altered space. It was something far stranger and far more profound. Thought it was a question. The original question. The first thought the universe had ever had. In the first nanosecond of existence, before light or matter or energy, the cosmos had asked itself, what should the rules be? For 14 billion years, no one had answered. The laws of physics had simply emerged on their own, like water flowing downhill. They were not designed. They were not chosen. They were just what happened when no one was paying attention. But the question was still there. Still waiting. Still open. Alina called it the nexus point, the place where all cosmic laws originated. The source code of reality itself, and humanity was about to provide an answer. She shared her findings with Admiral Mensa and Marcus Chun. The three of them stood in her laboratory, surrounded by equations that covered every wall. And they understood what they were looking at. If we can reach this place, Elena said, we can change everything. Not just bend the laws. Not just break them. We can help write new ones. The elders will never allow it, Mensa said. The elders will try to stop us, Marcus replied. His eyes flickered through colors that had no names. But they cannot guard every approach to the Nexus. They do not even know where it is. I do, Elena said quietly. I know where the door is. The news spread quickly. The Purist Coalition denounced the plan as madness. The Luminari doubled their attacks, throwing everything they had at human space. The Vethkai watched in silence, calculating possibilities that stretched across millennia. And the Prometheus Rising prepared for its final voyage. The ship had been rebuilt 100 times since Yuki Tanaka first discovered the anomaly. It was larger now, stronger, equipped with technologies that would have seemed like magic 50 years ago. But at its heart, it was still the same vessel. Still the ship that had started everything. Captain Yuki Tanaka was 79 years old. Her hair was silver, her face lined with decades of wonder and worry. She had spent her entire life chasing the mystery she had found at the edge of that dead world. Now she was going to see it through to the end. You know, this might kill us, Admiral Mensa said as he watched her board the ship. Everything might kill us, Yuki replied with a smile. That has never stopped humanity before. The fleet gathered at the edge of the threshold. 300 human vessels, the largest force humanity had ever assembled. Against them stood 80,000 elder ships, a wall of metal and energy that stretched across the sky. The Luminari Archon spoke through every channel, his voice echoing across dimensions. Surrender. Abandon this heresy. Accept the Concordat, and you may live. Continue, and you will be erased from existence. As if you never were. Admiral Mensa's response was simple. We would rather become something new than remain something safe. The battle began. Human. Ships fell by the hundreds. Elder weapons tore through shields and armor with ease. The void filled with fire and debris and the screaming of dying vessels. But the Prometheus Rising did not fight. It flew straight through the chaos, guided by Marcus Chun's impossible senses, protected by liminal operatives, who bent reality around it like water around a stone. They reached the coordinates Elena had calculated, a point in space that looked like nothing special, empty, cold, indistinguishable from a trillion other points in the universe. I looked at her crew. 20 volunteers. 20 humans who had chosen to die if necessary, to give their species a chance at something greater. "We are not destroying the laws," she said. "We are opening them. After today, everyone gets a voice. Everyone gets to help write the next draft." She gave the order. The Prometheus Rising did not fly into the Nexus Point. It became the Nexus Point. The ship and its crew spread out across dimensions, their matter and energy dissolving into the fundamental question at the heart of reality. Yuk I Tanaka, in her last moment of existence as a human being, felt the universe welcome her. She felt the question that had waited 14 billion years for an answer, and she answered. The door opened. Where the Prometheus Rising had been, there was now something else. A gateway, a passage, an invitation to anyone brave enough to accept it. The Luminari tried to destroy it. They fired weapons that had shattered moons and broken worlds. The gateway absorbed them all, transforming their destructive energy into something creative, something new. The architects of the void, silent for 10,000 years, suddenly moved. Their great vessels turned toward the gateway and began to approach. Not to attack, not to defend, simply to witness. And the Vethkai, who had been watching humanity with growing wonder, made their choice. High Arbiter Vethkael led his people through the gateway. He was the oldest mind in the universe. He had spent millennia believing that the laws were fixed. That change was dangerous. That growth was something to be feared. Now he stepped into the Nexus Point. And for the first time in 10,000 years, he remembered what it felt like to hope. Behind him, the war paused. Ships on both sides stopped firing, their crews staring at the impossible thing that had appeared in their midst. A door to the heart of reality itself. A chance to help write the next chapter of existence. And beyond the door, waiting with patience that had lasted since the beginning of time, the universe asked its ancient question once again. What should the rules be? For the first time ever, someone was ready to answer. Inside the Nexus Point, there was no space. There was no time. There was only the question and those who had come to answer it. Marcus Chun stood at the center of everything. Or perhaps he was the center of everything. Inside this place, the difference between standing somewhere and being somewhere did not exist. Around him gathered the others. Human scientists who had spent their lives studying the edges of reality. Vethkai elders who had remembered how to hope. Even a few architects, their vast minds finally turning from observation to participation. And there was something else. Something that had been waiting here since before the stars existed. It was not a being, not a god, not a force. It was the question itself, given form by the attention of those who had finally come to answer it. "You came," the question said, and its voice was the sound of possibility. "We came," Marcus replied. "All of us, together." High Arbiter Vethkael moved forward. His form flickered here, unstable in a place that existed before forms were invented. "We were wrong," he said. "For 10,000 years we believed the universe was finished. We believed the laws were complete. We were afraid of what would happen if we kept reaching. So we stopped. We froze ourselves in place and called it wisdom. And now?" the question asked. "Now we know better. Humans taught us that. They showed us that endings are not failures. That change is not destruction. That the laws were never meant to be chains." Marcus spoke next. His voice came from everywhere at once, from every possible version of himself across every possible timeline. "We are not here to destroy what came before," he said. "We are here to add to it, to help the universe grow, to answer the question that has been waiting since the beginning. What is your answer?" the question asked. Marcus smiled. It was the smile of a human being, simple and warm and full of hope. "The laws should evolve," he said. They should grow with those who live under them. Entropy does not have to mean ending. It can mean transformation. Energy does not have to decay into nothing. It can flow into new creation. The universe does not have to be a closed system running down to silence. It can be an open story, still being written. The question considered this. Around them, reality itself seemed to hold its breath. And who will write it? Everyone, Marcus said. Every species. Every mind. Every consciousness that is willing to take responsibility for the cosmos they live in. Not gods ruling from above. Not masters commanding from thrones. Partners, gardeners. Caretakers who tend the garden of existence and help it grow. The Vethkai added their voice. We will help. We who have existed since the beginning. We will share what we know, and we will learn what we have forgotten. The architects, silent for so long, finally spoke. Their voice was mathematics made sound, equations given breath. We calculate this is possible. We calculate this is necessary. We will participate. The question seemed to glow brighter. Or perhaps that was just the perception of minds, finally understanding what they were seeing. Then let it be so, the question said. The laws are no longer fixed. They are agreements. They can be changed by those who are willing to take responsibility for the changes. This is my gift to you, and my challenge. The Nexus Point began to transform. The gateway that the Prometheus Rising had created expanded, becoming not a door, but a meeting place. A council chamber existing outside of time, where any species willing to participate could gather to discuss the future of reality itself. They called it the Council of Becoming. Outside, the war was ending. The Luminari, who had refused to participate, found themselves bound by laws that now evolved beyond their understanding. Their ancient weapons no longer worked the way they expected. Their strategies, perfected over millions of years, suddenly became obsolete. They had a choice: join the Council of Becoming, or fade into irrelevance. Many chose to fade. They retreated to their dying stars and their empty empires, holding on to the old ways even as the universe moved on without them. But some, a few brave souls who remembered what it was like to hope, made the journey to the Nexus Point and asked to learn. They were welcomed. The Council of Becoming did not require agreement. It did not demand conformity. It only asked for willingness. Willingness to participate. Willingness to change. Willingness to help write the next chapter. Humanity spread across the cosmos, not as conquerors, but as teachers and students both. They brought their gift of adaptability to species who had forgotten how to grow. And in return, they learned from civilizations that had existed when their ancestors were still single cells floating in a primordial soup. On Earth, the changes were visible even from space. The planet was healing. Wounds that had taken centuries to create were closing in decades. Technologies that had seemed impossible were becoming everyday tools. Children played games that would have broken the minds of the greatest scientists from 100 years ago. Admiral Mensa retired to a small house by the sea. He wrote poetry about the stars and the long war that had led to peace. Sometimes, late at night, he would look up at the sky and remember the friends he had lost. But the grief was softer now, because he knew their sacrifice had meant something. He knew the universe was better for what they had done. Elena Vasquez became the first human ambassador to the architects. She spent her remaining years learning their language of mathematics and teaching them the language of emotion. When she died, peacefully, surrounded by beings from a dozen species, her last words were, "There is still so much to learn." And Marcus Chun became something vast and strange, and still somehow entirely himself. He existed in 17 dimensions now. He could perceive time as a landscape rather than a river. He could speak to stars and listen to the songs of galaxies. But when humans needed him, When they had questions or fears or hopes to share, he was always there. Still human, still kind, still reaching. A young girl asked him once, what was humanity's greatest achievement? Marcus smiled, and for a moment he looked just like the young man who had stepped between the laws so many years ago. We did not ascend to godhood, he said. We stayed mortal. We just convinced the universe that mortality is not a weakness, that endings can be beginnings, that the laws were never meant to be a cage. They were meant to be a conversation. The girl thought about this for a long time. If we helped rewrite the universe once, she said finally, does that mean we can do it again? Marcus laughed. It was a warm sound, full of hope and wonder and love. That is the whole point, he said. We never stop rewriting. None of us do. Not anymore. Above them, new stars were being born. Stars that burned with colors the old universe could not have contained. The first stars of a new reality. The first lights of a story that would never end. 10,000 years of quiet had finished. 10,000 years of becoming had begun. And somewhere, in the spaces between moments and the gaps between laws, the universe itself seemed to smile. Finally, after 14 billion years, it was no longer alone.